This is the first of 3 sales and marketing sprints for CEO schools. Today, we're going to talk about sales strategy. And next month, we are going to be talking about pitching with confidence. And then we're going to round it out with implementation and measurement. By the end, you will have your marketing funnel, your sales plan, some PR and marketing ideas, and your targets that we will continue to work through. Your forums start next week. We will probably meet in Butter, all as one group, and then you'll spend the whole hour with your forum leader. Some of you have Preeti, some of you have Sally, and they are both super excited to be working with you. So the activity that we'll show you at the end of today is what you will dive into next week in your forum, but we do ask that you give it some attention before then, so that you don't come in with a blank sheet. So today we're going to be talking about sales mindset, your effective strategy, setting SMART goals, and your marketing funnel.
Now, today's .com discussion is entitled CEO School, and the hardest thing to do when you're running a business and selling is to look at it through CEO eyes. That is, through the person in charge of the business. So often selling takes a huge amount of our energy, actually, and so it should. It's a core task, obviously. Today, what I'm going to be trying to do is encouraging you to look at this sales discussion, not as the person doing the selling, but as the person designing the methodology and also critically reviewing the results. CEO School isn't about the doing, it's about the planning and the execution. Although that might sound like a boring semantic point, I can promise you it's a different way of looking at the same problem. So today, we want you to look at it not as neuroscientists, we want you to look at it as critical design observers, okay? So that's how today's approach to selling and the discussion about selling is. Now, selling isn't as rarefied a skill as many people think. Selling is about communication, actually. There are lots of different forms of communication. But selling isn't something, contrary to the belief of course running organizations, something that is of itself distinct from human personality. We're all of us ingrained with selling skills. It's a communication style, and therefore do not worry if you don't find selling the most exciting thing in your business. It could be the product, it could be something else about it. Selling is about communicating. So I would say be confident that if you can understand and describe your product and what it does, you are capable of selling it. And a lot of people feel, oh, I'm not a natural salesperson, and therefore that makes me a weakened individual. I disagree with that, actually. Selling is very much about establishing a relationship that culminates in mutual trust. And mutual trust is a skill that we learn in the playground. So long as you learned how to talk to people, get them to lend you the tennis ball for 5 minutes and then gave it back to them, trust building is where selling is rooted. Now, the problem that, again, people often accidentally misread is that in business, there is no motivation to buy something, perhaps apart from some sort of strange quirk, just a sheer acquisitive urge. But 99.9% of business transactions on the part of the purchasing individual are problem-solving decisions. So it's a good axiom, again, when you're thinking about talking to people, go into it with the understanding that they're only going to part with money if you solve a problem for them. Nice to haves, decorative solutions that you think are very exotic might be the right thing, but actually, unless it's solving a problem for them, they're not going to be interested. And vice versa, you've got to do a lot of listening to make sure you can structure how your product or service exists so that you can address it to the problems they've articulated. It's a very basic point again here, and not at all difficult to grasp, but it's very easy to mistake the fact that the sheer beauty and elegance of the way you were going to talk about your product is so exciting to you, you just carry on doing it and accidentally overlook what they're saying to us in the communication and trust building stage. Now, winning at sales is less complex, again, than you might imagine. We've already talked about the fact that your skills are already well embedded, so you don't need to spend the next 2 years on a Harvard Business School remote course to learn how to sell. I promise you that. Secondly, we've already touched on the point that if you listen and address your discussion to the client needs and problems, then winning at sales comes a lot easier. But most people fail at those two first hurdles. Ironically, when you're in discussion with the customer, winning or the chances of winning go up vertically. It's really dramatic. So how do you win at sales? Understanding the customer's needs, problems, and status are the beginning of a great conversation, either remotely, electronically, or face-to-face. Being curious is an interesting way of learning a great deal about a customer's situation. I was once told many moons ago that if you wanted to get a disinterested or disengaged person talking openly and freely, the easiest thing to do is to talk to them first of all and say, oh, how did you get into this business, Mrs. X or Mr. Y? What excited you about this business? And before you're 10 minutes into a conversation, you know their kids' name, so they all play netball or football, and suddenly you've moved from never knowing each other to actually in a conversation where you're starting to like each other, which is the progression you want to move on. And being curious means asking questions. And although we know what our product is and we know its strengths and perhaps some of its weaknesses, it's a really big mistake to throw all of that information at a customer and tell a whole shed load of stuff about them. And the more they tell you, the more you'll be able to have a really powerful conversation with them about the match between their problems and your solution to it. Now, to reiterate what I've just said there, genuinely interested is this subtle but important human skill. I will have mentioned to some of you either in one-to-one mentoring or in other sessions, the progression to the stage where people part with money is a uniformly linear one. And whether remotely or in person, it goes from knowing each other, progressing to liking each other, and don't misunderstand the value of that. Human liking each other, trusting each other, and then lastly buying. And that's where commercial exchange takes place. Now, we all know the skills of getting to know people, whether it's at a parents' evening, meeting somebody you didn't know, or the spouse of somebody at a party, or wherever it is. If you've actually got the interpersonal skill and the headspace in the moment to just have a conversation, driven as much by them as you, that genuine interest really helps provide a foundation to that liking phase. And that's why genuinely interested is in this phrase. If you're just there asking routine questions in a very ABC way, it will feel like that. Humans are very good at picking up subtle interaction. And therefore, if you've got a thing in your head of what I want to ask, turn it into a conversation and be comfortable for it to go down rabbit holes and come back out again. Because that genuine interest in other people really helps them to like you, because it projects you like them. And you will not sell anything to somebody who doesn't like you. It's impossible. So it's not, let's try and get past this phase. You have to cross that bridge during the conversion discussion. Now, behind the human interaction, which we focused on a little bit so far, you've got to have a methodology going on quietly, whirring around inside your brain, almost like an ABCD of what's going to be happening here. The secret sauce we all have, you all have it, is basically built on you having a clear vision for what your business is. And that vision expresses itself in passion. Now, usually people cannot be passionate about something if they don't have a deeply rooted vision. We'll talk about vision in other segments of this CEO school in more detail. But in principle, if you've got a passion for your business, you've already got a vision for what it is and what you want it to be. Allow that to come out in the conversation. Resilience means the ability, in this context at least, to deliver your promises, be there for the customer and meet expectations and where possible exceed them. So resilience isn't something you can learn off the shelf. It isn't a behavior that you can afford to ignore. Projection of resilience is a really key part of business exchange because it helps reinforce the trust side of relationship. The more reliable and resilient a person seems, the better the chances they'll progress to trusting you. Now, goals, I know that the word SMART is about 150 years old now. It's probably coined by Isaac Newton for all I know, but it has the beauty of simplicity. Your conversation with the customer should have objectives. Your selling process, you should be thinking to yourself, where am I going to try and be at the end of this conversation? You can't guarantee you will be, but it's interesting to set yourself some easily articulated objectives for the conversation. And it could be as simple as, I want to move to the point where I am clear that we like each other, or we trust each other if you're already at the liking stage, or that we've agreed to meet in person on the 10th of April at 12 o'clock in central London, or whatever. But a goal to a conversation helps keep us honest when we're having our interaction, so that the conversation, which I firmly recommend you focus on, behind the conversation, there is a firm objective to the interaction. And the good thing about setting goals is we achieve objectives much, much better if we're clear in our own mind what we're trying to do. So it doesn't need to be a 4-page SMART objective sheet, but it does need to be, I'm going into this conversation with this clear outcome in mind. And then lastly, in creating good interaction, one of the most infectious behaviors that helps energize us, but also helps build liking and trust in a conversation, and therefore the sales process, is the articulation of ambition. It's linked heavily to the vision and passion you have for the business, but ambition will be something that will crop up in a good trust-building conversation. The other party will want to know where you want to go, what size of business do you want to be, etc., etc. So don't be too coy about this, because ambition signals a lot of positive mindset and behavior characteristics. So be ambitious in your language and your behavior. And again, these things take many forms, and they should be articulated and fashioned for the engagement you're having. But one way or another, ambition is a very, very powerful added ingredient to a conversation with a potential buyer. Now, you will have interactions with people that don't work. Selling is by its nature a failure as well as a successful based transactional experience. In fact, in service selling, if you can get one successful conversion out of 5 interactions, you're doing very well. And in a product sale, I'm thinking particularly here, Sam, of you, things are slightly more about the nature of the product and what problems it solves. And so that's a slightly more complex thing to come up with. But all I would want to say is expect failure. Expect failure in your sales interaction, because that is natural and it's normal and it's part of the process. Where it gets really difficult is when you're in a highly competitive space. This happens very much in a large B2B environment where there are 10 very good companies all competing for the same thing. Quite often you can win only 5% of your sales interactions. So the sales side of things is very expensive and littered with failure. So please do not think that failure in your selling process is wrong. What's clever, though, is to think, why are they failing? And can I improve and adapt? And we'll return to this as a theme during the CEO School course. Now, I've just really tried to tell you that there is a lot of human interaction in selling, and there is. But there's also a bit of a secret methodology that does tend to be underpinning sales interaction. And I want to talk to that briefly with you as a group as well. If you're going to be selling to someone, it makes a heck of a lot of sense that you're doing it to somebody who you've got some idea has the problem you're trying to solve. And secondly, fits the kind of customer identity that you have already decided are your target market. Now, the definition of a perfect customer is a highly suspect thing to ever arrive at in absolute terms. Probably better left to philosophers rather than business people and entrepreneurs. But it is important we have a mind's eye view of what a perfect customer looks like. And it's different for every business. It could be a male audience, it could be a female audience, it could be a gender neutral audience, it could be goodness knows what, it could be an age-based thing, it could be a business segment, it could be a vertical, it could be a horizontal, it could be a goodness knows what. But the thing is, there tends to be sweet spots of customers if one thinks of a Venn diagram mentally, where that's the hotspot. Those are the customer characteristics that represent the perfect customer for me. Now, I don't want to spend hours on this, but I think it would be really fun if we just quickly talked about what are the 2 or 3 things that look like a perfect customer for us, and and don't worry if you don't know the answers to these things. It's a good prompt to go away and have another think about it. I don't know, Becky, whether in your mind you've got 1 or 2 characteristics that really stand out in a perfect customer for your business.
Yeah, it's a good question. I do. So because I work across the nonprofit sector, I don't tend to narrow myself specifically by the type of charity or nonprofit they are, although I do have emerging areas where I work in more commonly than others. Typically, I look for somebody who has a little bit of budget for external support. So I know that they're probably going to be upwards of about £300,000 turnover, and typically my biggest clients quite large, but an average charity that I might work with might be around the sort of £500,000 to £2 million turnover. So they're small enough not to have the resource in-house, but large enough to have budget to pay for it. And then I have pro bono clients, or clients that I might charge a smaller amount to, that may be very small, very in need of our services, but can't afford to pay like the list rate. And I give myself a budget for how many of those I can help, so we don't have to ask.
And Alice, Jane, Sam, listening to Becky there, 1 or 2 of you were nodding. You already start to get a feel for the sort of customer she's talking about there. Can you get a mind's eye picture of what Becky must have in her head?
I think, Becky, you did a brilliant job of defining who it is that you're trying to help, and things about turnover and stuff, that you know exactly where they are at in their journey is building as a charity, and when and how they're going to have budget and stuff like that. It's brilliant.
It can be helpful. I was going to say, so an example this week where I discovered a bit of a recently untapped customer segment is a couple of weeks ago, I was commissioned by Eton College to do some work, which I'm undergoing a partnership with them at the moment to deliver some work. Now, obviously, they're a huge charity in the charity sort of sphere, but interestingly, the specific piece of work that they've commissioned me to do is all about redeveloping their charitable strategy in the anticipation that a Labour government will be our next government, hypothetically. And there's been a lot of discussion with independent schools about what their registered charity status will remain looking like. That got me thinking, and a friend of mine is a bursar at an independent school. So I said to her, look, this is basically the outline project that I'm doing with Eton. Is this something that is of interest to other independent schools? She came back saying it's actually almost the main subject at the International Schools Bursars Conference this summer. And so that got me thinking, okay, if Eton need this, and they really do have the funds to do this in-house, but they want someone external, very sort of un-Eton to do it, then this is a great opportunity for me to reach out to other independent schools. So sometimes it's an opportunity-led sort of sector segmentation.
What's clear is that you, like all of us, you will have an evolving definition of your customer base, because you've got a problem you can solve, and you find new groups of people who display that problem. But that's brilliant. Alice, if I can just ask you, if you've got a similar sort of 1 or 2 points that always come to your mind when you're thinking about what your perfect customer might look like.
My perfect customer also has some money to spend, and also doesn't have the expertise in-house, or if they do have it in-house, they're busy elsewhere, and they will have a reasonable proportion of women, of employees of a particular age, up to about 40-ish. That's the age, 20 to 40, 30 to 40, even better. And somebody in the exec leadership team understands, values looking after working parents, basically.
Excellent. And again, just opening this up to the other people in this call today, do you start to get a feel for what Alice's customer might look like from that? Yeah, very good. How about you, Jane? What does a customer look like from your point of view? What sort of animal are you out there searching around with your spear and net to try and ensnare?
Yeah, in fact, that's kind of evolving. I'm trying to change my business model so that, for people who don't know, I'm like a software engineer, like freelance, but also specialize in helping with conversions for websites. So I'm trying to change the business model to being more scalable. So doing some kind of online course. I did a research call last night. Originally, I thought that the people I'm trying to aim for would be like solo founders and CEOs, but just from the feedback I got from that call, I'm actually thinking I might need to change my tactic. So I'm not approaching necessarily the founders of the company directly. I think it might be a good idea if I change my product or service and angle it towards virtual assistants and think of me as an assistant for the assistants kind of thing. I was thinking through it last night, and I don't know if anyone's a gamer here at all, but I stopped playing computer games when Super Mario finished like decades ago. They got that whole term like expansion pack. I thought to myself, like, I'm an expansion pack for virtual assistants. So to help them be more confident with setting up like tech infrastructure, whether that's like setting up, say, a challenge or an email challenge or something like that, or them feeling more confident with setting up websites or optimizing them and things like that.
So you're in a very dynamic stage at the moment, aren't you, where you're trying, you say, oh, these are my skills, these are the problems I can solve, let's find who that group is. And that's a perfectly natural part of developing an entrepreneurial business. It's finding where that best and perfect customer is. So that's great. You're in the discovery stage, in the defining stage. Excellent. Yeah. And Sam, how about you?
So I'm looking at B2B customers rather than individuals, obviously. I'm about 6 to 8 weeks away from actually being ready to sell. So I haven't got any prior experience to, speak from yet. My perfect customer would be a retailer who has already got a selection of solid bar products on their shelves. So they've already got not just soap bars, but they've got a selection of shampoo bars and shaving bars and facial bars. They've already got these things on their shelves. So my product can sit next to it and be an accessory or really add value to the products that are already on their shelves. So what I'd really like to go for in an ideal world is the people like the Boots of this world and the Holland and Barretts and places like that. But I'm also thinking there's probably more range wholesalers that I can look at who are perhaps supplying more things like the eco shops and the health food shops and places like that tend to have those kind of products on their shelves as well.
Yeah, fascinating. So basically, what we can see is that the perfect customer is a plastic definition, and it is also our definition of our perfect customer evolves and changes as our business and our market understanding changes. So do not treat this as some sort of carved in stone thing that you have to keep going back to as some sort of lodestone of truth. Actually, it will change. But what's really good is to have an idea now of what your perfect customer is and be testing that, as we said in some of the earlier talk to slides, in discussion to find out whether your problem and your problem solving solution is what they want, or whether you need to refine either the way you're discussing it or your product, or actually your perfect customer, just as Jane is doing now, is moving because she's actually thinking, I'm going to do something slightly differently. But as the CEO, not knowing the heck who your customers are is a really dumb place to start. And if we were paying somebody to be going out selling, we'd expect them to know where to go, to metaphorically knock on which doors. So if we're in a small business, we need to be clear that we have some grasp on this. Otherwise, we will just be throwing mud against the wall like a muck spreader and exhausting ourselves without much chance of good outcome. So a lot of good sales activity is founded on understanding who's on the other side of the table. Now, some of you have either met Preeti or will as part of the mentoring and focus group sessions, but she has a lot to say about item 2, value proposition. Now, value propositions have historically been things that somebody comes and tells you how to articulate what your business is for, what its values are, or what its function. Her approach, which is much more in vogue with the high-performing organizations that we have nowadays, is that your value proposition should be articulated from the point of view of the customer. Now, that's an odd place to start from, but it's a good one. So if you're trying to talk about your business, you should be doing it standing in the shoes, in your case, Becky, of the Eton bursar, or Alice in the director responsible for the services that you want to sell into a business, or for you, Jane, into the virtual assistant. What's her life or his life like, and what's wrong with that, and what problem can you fix in there? Or Sam, what eco-range bathroom purchasing manager, what's their world look like, and how do I address their problems? Now, there's literally no point in saying something that's not relevant to them. Value proposition is not the same as the vision of your company. That's your internal view of what you're trying to do. but the value proposition is very much, what problem am I trying to solve for the customer? But has to be from their point of view. And if you can't imagine them saying it or wanting it or needing it, you've got to re-articulate that. And really, the point about item 2 on this slide is that it makes you think really hard about the customer problem from their perspective. And again, a value proposition that's more than 15 words long is, humans don't think in paragraphs. We think in phrases of 1 to 5 words. And therefore, you need to be thinking about your value proposition. Not that you will ever say it to them, but if you can understand the customer problem with that degree of clarity, then you will have a far better chance of converting and selling to them, because you will know before you go into the room very likely what's wrong, and your earlier curiosity-based conversational work and inquiry will help you, if necessary, burnish that value proposition a bit more. Now, item 3 on this slide is a slightly sort of bit of management gobbledygook, strong guarantee. In fact, what this really means is, what risk is the buyer taking and what risk am I as the seller taking? To what degree am I guaranteeing as a seller that you'll get results? Now, you can imagine a conversation going along the lines of, don't worry, this aeroplane is brilliant, it'll work, just buy 5 of them at 300 million a pop. That's an easy conversation to have, but it's not a very strong guarantee. What a better guarantee might be, I've got this backstory, look at, there's 800 of them in the air and blah, blah, blah. But you might also have a more, shall we say, unproven product, or despite building enough trust to get to the point where you're talking about a transaction, you haven't crossed that threshold into getting them to buy. And quite often with small businesses, it helps a lot if you're prepared to share the commercial risk of them buying in the early stages. And that could be either through the form of deferred payment. So it could be the upfront payment is 20% of the fee, the completion of project is a further 50%, and the remaining 30% is 2 months after on results or something like that. People feel like I don't suggest that's necessarily relevant in either numbers or methodology to you, but getting the customer to feel that you are so confident or so mature in your understanding of their position that you're prepared to share the risk of the transaction with them projects a strong trust building behavior. And therefore it might not be relevant to all businesses, but it is true in a lot. And whether it's small organizations or large, I'm involved with a very large construction company at director level, and we don't blink our eyes if there's a retention. Sorry, the overall contract might be worth 500 million. We think nothing that 50 million won't be paid for 3 years after the building's finished. That's a heck of a strong guarantee, isn't it? A 10% discount if it doesn't work out the way we said or whatever. That's the entire profit on the project. So we're saying, really, we're deferring the entire profit on the project for 3 years. That makes the customer think, right, these people are going to do a good job. So anyway, strong guarantees, however subtle, small or large, make an impression on customer behavior. And then lastly, another behavioral thing that matters a lot, and I'm sure you all know it either from observing it where people are dealing with you, or you've seen the results yourself. The 2 things that really resonate when you're in competition with somebody to sell a service or a product are the speed with which you respond to inquiries from the customer and the quality with which you respond. Now, it's point 4 here is about, it says sense of urgency, but I think it also should also say and quality. The people who get back to the customer first with the succinct answer and the quality of information almost always end up being the successful candidates. And I've got first-hand examples of this just in the last couple of days. One of my clients sells a lot of consumable materials into the aeronautics, marine and automobile. This is a sort of like luxury end cars and Formula One to build and construct the cars. Now, one of the competitors in that space has just gone into bankruptcy, and they had some very glamorous customers. You may not know them, but Oyster Yachts, the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, build their own boats. And the other day, they won the contract for the RNLI, which is worth about £2 million a year, very substantial, for 5 years. And we met on the morning the liquidation of the other company was announced, which came out about 10 a.m. We, from all of our different parts of the globe and world, we met online. We agreed what the big clients were, and we reached out to all of those big clients by midday. We got our response back first. We helped them with some problems they had, and we've just been awarded the contract after working all through the night and everything a couple of before the weekend to get a successful and professional offer put to them. But all along the way, we were told yesterday we were first to response. Our responses, even though we were first, were the most professional and accurate, and we were the people who impressed them. So that sense of urgency made not a small difference there, it made all the difference. And I know that to be true from my own experience. And I can see you all nodding. You've obviously behaved like that when you're buying stuff from other people. It's just human behavior, isn't it? So urgency matters a lot. Leaving it till next Wednesday might not be the best way of dealing with a customer inquiry. Okay, so if we can ping on then. Now, you'll probably all recognize this as part of the New Beginnings program, but it's also always part of our business program as well. Now, if we're thinking about sales and the next 12 months, it's always interesting to review as CEOs, what are my organization's what are the key objectives we have? In other words, what is our strategic goal on sales? And it might be interesting just to chat for a couple of minutes about what our key sales goals are at a strategic level. I don't know, for example, Sam, whether you've even begun to put a number at what you would like your sales number to be in the next 12 months, or what sort of goals have you set yourself, if any, for sales in the next 12 months?
Oh gosh, I keep tinkering around at the moment with cash flows that only go up to July, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I think I've been so focused on just getting everything ready to actually go and sell. I have put some numbers together, but I just feel like they're not completely plucking numbers out of the air, but with no trading history, it's really hard to know, and it's a completely different product. I just don't have any concrete information to say whether it's even vaguely realistic. It might be completely underselling, or maybe this will be hugely successful and my numbers are completely underrepresenting what's possible, and I just don't know at the moment.
You're certainly at a very early stage in your product development, aren't you? You're ready to go to market almost, aren't you?
So yeah, the product, at least the initial phase of it, because I'm trying to get to points, and I'm nearly there, where the product is something I can go and present to customers, to have those early conversations that you were talking about at the beginning, to get their feedback, because I'm fully expecting that there will be some feedback and I'm going to have to tweak things to suit what they would say will actually sell. That's kind of my mindset at the moment. So at the moment, I'm thinking presenting more for those early conversations, rather than going, yeah, okay, I want to walk out of here with a commitment to take on some products right now.
Now, I don't know about, it might be interesting to hear from one or two others in the group this morning, but so at the moment, let's take it that you haven't put a number on a piece of paper and pinned it to the notice board above your desk to say, actually, I would like to sell X £100,000 this year or something. What do others think the value of Sam coming up with a number like that would be at this point?
I would really encourage you to do it, because I've got my old New Beginnings, which is now, so I was New Beginnings September 21. What's that, 18 months ago? I've got my scribbles on my whiteboard right by my desk, and I didn't know what numbers to put down. And I remember I said to Nigel, I just feel my brain is much more academic. I wanted to be really realistic, but so I was getting caught up in that. How do I do this? And I remember just being like, just put some numbers down and just get them down, even if it just feels a bit crazy. I actually think there's something really powerful about having there and having it, looking at it. I've exceeded those goals each year. And I think that's a lot to do with having something you're aiming for, understanding what output needs to look like. So how many clients is that, and what average spend is that to get there? And then that drives your conversations and how many conversations you're having. So I would really encourage you to put a number down. And for me, I think I felt that was hugely ambitious. So it's really encouraging to see that actually we've exceeded that each year. So about to tick off the next one. I have a little green pen and I tick it when I get something on my spine. But yeah, I think that it's okay if you don't get it, because you'll have made such huge progress. But I'm quite amazed at the power of having a number.
That's interesting. And actually, it's interesting what you just said about breaking it down, and what you said about Becky. Well done, by the way, that's amazing. But yeah, that's interesting what you say, because there's the real world impact I want my product to have. Taking like financial forecasts out for a moment, there's what I want to achieve in a real world sense, and then trying to backtrack that into numbers. And it's actually, I say I've done nothing. At one stage, I did think, well, how many of these boxes would I need to sell per month in a Waitrose, for example, in order to do that? So I perhaps need to try and connect that all a little bit better together, maybe. Again, that's good to hear. That's encouraging to hear as well.
And I think it was lovely to hear that story, Becky, and it's repeated every single time. You will all get the same powerful turbocharge from it, I promise you. The reality is these numbers are not for your bank manager. They're not even for your spouses or whatever else. They're for you. And those numbers can be what you want them to be, and you can change them, and you can exceed them, and you can underachieve them because you've decided to do things in a different order, in a different pace, at a different way. But those numbers are your friend, because what they are is they're a motivator. We're all competitive people. You wouldn't be an entrepreneur unless you actually had a dynamo inside you driving your energy and resources. Pick a number for the next 12 months for sales, and that will help you as we go through the program of CEO School. It will help you drive the actions you need to take to achieve it. And just as Becky's highlighted, and you've also talked to, Sam, it makes a lot of other things fall into some sort of structured thinking then, doesn't it? If that's the key thing I'm trying to get to, let's say £200,000 of sales in the next 12 months, what would that really mean? And so that, anyway, that's very interesting.
I would say, if I expand on that point a wee bit, I remember a few years ago made a goal for myself, which was mortgage free by 40. I didn't
Hello,
achieve
Sarah.
that.
Hiya, hello.
But act of kind of like me declaring that was useful. I follow somebody online, it's like Mariah Cause. I think she explained it well, and that when you make a goal like that, it doesn't necessarily matter if you achieve it or not. It's more about how it helps you, like kind of what Becky was saying, it helps you to focus on what's a priority for you, what you want to see in your life, what are the outcomes that you really want to do. I would love to be mortgage free. I'm not there yet, but it made me realise that's important to me, and it's a real sign of progress.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually, Jane. And I think I perhaps have not yet applied the right mindset to the sales side. I think exactly, actually, you've hit the nail on the head, really, Jane, with if I think up to this point, I was working going, I need to produce a product, and this is going to take a lot of upfront investment to achieve it. And I knew the amount of money that I had personally to put into this, and I knew it wasn't enough. So then it was going off thinking, well, how can I achieve the goals that I need to get to this point, given this is the amount of money? What other ways? And I've spent a lot of brain power rejigging things, conversations with people, finding cheaper ways to do things, different ways to do things, supplementing with grants, lots of different ways, because I knew that was the goal, was I had to have these certain outputs product-wise. So I think you're right, it's that mindset, and I probably now need to start applying it to the sales process now.
Alice, do you have any sort of shared experience on, okay, that's a number and that's what I'm trying to do? Is that the way you look at what you're trying to do over the next 12 months?
I'd love to say yes, but I'm hopeless at it. I can 100% see the value and power of it. And at various points in my business, I have done it, stingly more as a way to work out how much what I can actually fit in with the time that I've got available to me. So in a different way, I've been doing it. But just as we were talking, actually, I was less thinking about revenues, more about people. So I want 100 people to take this program. And I know that if I charge 500 quid for that per person, then that's 50 grand. Yeah, I was more, I think as we were talking about it just now, I was more thinking about it in terms of people, but knowing behind that what that will actually get me in terms of revenue.
Yeah, excellent. Sarah, great to see you this morning. We've been chatting about selling basically, and we're at this point where we're saying, okay, what's our sales goal for the next 12 months? People have talked to that point. I don't know whether you've got a clear sales objective, either articulated like Alice in terms of quantity and at a price, or as a number written on a post-it note stuck at the top of your monitor or whatever.
Really good question. Yeah, my head's been imploding trying to do that. No, I haven't, and I should. I feel like I'm at and I was talking to Alice about this the other day, I feel like I've reached a really good point with the business in terms of I've changed what I'm trying to do. I've got a really clear idea of what my clients are. I now need to start converting all of this into actual paid work. I've got other paid work, but I want it to be in this sphere. So I don't know how to set myself a target for a new territory to be honest. Maybe it's more about contacts and like talking to people at this stage rather than conversion. I don't know, because I start feeling a little bit sick when I start setting myself big goals from a standing start.
I don't blame you for that sort of mild queasiness, because actually it's starting to make, shall we say, it's challenging pressure take shape, isn't it? And that's a daunting thing, and it shouldn't be underestimated in the mental side of running a business.
Yeah.
You joined just after Becky spoke about sitting in your chair, metaphorically, feeling exactly the same in 2021, and realizing, looking back on it, that actually putting a number to it and it's almost like giving it shape, this scary prospect, is the beginning of coping with it and learning how to do it. It frees you, it doesn't enslave you.
Yeah. And I think on that note, I'd really be happy to say out loud, what I want to be earning is 100k a year. That would be, I would be really happy with that.
Great.
But how I get there and how long it takes me to get there, I don't know. And I don't think it's realistic to say that from now. But maybe that's what do I say, a 2-year plan?
Yeah, we always like to look in 3-year forward looks and then really drill down into the next 12 months, because that's when the most immediate action happens. So we'll talk separately, Sarah, about that and how to support that side of your development. But what I'm hearing in all of this is there's a clear realization that having a sales number, it's a strategy really, it's what I want to do, is a fundamental part of a CEO's role in a business. Because without a headline goal like that, there's a danger that one gets submerged in doing stuff rather than achieving stuff. And the sales result is actually the resultant from quite a complex equation with lots of different variables. And what it does is it allows us to say, if I want 100 as the result of this multi-part business that I'm running with all its complexity and component elements, I have to keep working at this business and refining and changing so that 100 happens.
Yeah.
But without the 100 to hang your hat on, one can end up just doing a lot of component and elemental changes, but still never get to 100 or anything like it. So that's where Becky's, I think, story really resonates for today's discussion on the what that matters, is that if you have the what, it starts to calibrate a lot of other things, and it frees you from a lot of the detail of what's my real purpose of being here. Okay, so we will talk that the hows are quite a detailed area, and we'll come back to those as part of your individual discussions. Now, the last thing we want to deal with today, the sales process tends to follow this path. For many of you, there's a lot of things in here that won't be news, and we can, depending on the quality of our engagement or the customer's particular buying state, they can go from stage 1 to stage 5 in one step. But these are the classic steps that you will take a customer through on a journey. The first one is to make a customer aware for the first time that you, your business, your service or product exists. So they don't know anything about you today, but tomorrow, as a result of some form of outward projection, tomorrow they do. So this is about getting to all part of the getting to know you element of sales progression. And the same's true about consideration. So you've sent stuff to them, or they've heard from you, and they start thinking about you, your product, your service. Stage 1 and 2 are largely driven by what we push out to the world. Could be phone calls, could be going to a B2B meeting session, it could be sending stuff through the post, God forbid, or it could be e-based marketing. But awareness and consideration are what we do naturally. Oh, I'm aware of a new hair care product, to pick a trivial example, or I'm aware of a new electric car, or I'm aware as a consumer, I'm talking now, and now I'm going to start considering it. Now, our job is, once we've got people knowing about us at that early stage level, is to somehow move into conversion stage. How do BMW know that I've been onto their website 4 times in the last month, and I've had to leave my details to be able to go into the car configurator, and now they're reaching out, they will reach out to me. I'll get an email from somebody in their customer service team to try and engage and move things from me knowing about them to them knowing me and us moving to the liking each other stage. So conversion is about taking that early, quite low level engagement and trying to rack and stack it quickly into this person is capable or willing to buy, and I will focus on them. And conversion into a sale, as I've said before, it really takes us, they have to like us, and then they have to trust us, and then they will buy. And all of that, the previous discussion, takes us to the point where we've converted them. Some customers will become repeat customers. And if you're a product-based company, and I'm thinking a little bit more about your situation, Sam, what you want is, first of all, somebody who does the initial order, the product lives up to the story that you gave customers, and they come back and order again. Loyalty is about repeat purchasing, and that is usually built on both the trust that they had in you being demonstrated and made flesh in the actual transactions, but it's also about the experience they had and the quality of the experience. And lastly, and the highest level, if you like, on this inverted Maslow's triangle of selling here, is some customers love what you do so much they will go and tell others. They will recommend you to people. They're happy to have you put them on your website. They will happy to be a case study for you. Those sorts of advocates are rare, but not impossible. And those are like turbochargers to your sales funnel, because when people are in the consideration stage and you're engaging with them in the conversion stage, those advocates can be massively important. So just talk about what, as a group, we're going to be asking you to do in the coming days. I think if you can put that, we see the text a little bit there. So basically, there's a 5-point bit of homework here to do. And this, again, a bit like thinking about from a CEO point of view, what's the business actually doing? Take the I out of the sentences and insert the word business into this when you're thinking about these things, because otherwise one gets very personal about it, and your own time or whatever starts to get in the way of thinking the business needs. For this one, point 1, how might the business grab the spotlight and make the business stand out? Okay, and we need these personal pronouns in here, but you've got to think CEO here and think about what's the business doing. And what collaborations, what attention grabbing activities, what social media, if you find that as a tool. This is all available to you and will be circulated, so you don't have to make notes on this. From a consideration point of view, how might my business maintain a connection once they've discovered the business? What am I doing once that first nibble at the bait has taken place to try and get the hook lodged in the mouth of the potential prey? I'll drop the hunting metaphors here. Conversion, what can the business do to drive them to convert now that the business is in touch with them? And these sort of things are important, because if we just let them happen by accident, we're not thinking, as many of you have done, and thought carefully about what is my perfect customer. You ought to be thinking in a similar way about what are the tactics and what are the methods and how am I going to do this stuff? Okay. Loyalty, what sort of strategies will entice the business's customers to return and buy again? What are we doing to promote that? What are we doing to actively go out and make that happen rather than it be an accident of fate? And finally, how does the business inspire clients to spread the word within their network? And all I would say to this is approach this a bit like Sam is going to approach generating her first turnover goal. Have a cup of coffee or tea if you prefer, or a glass of brandy, depends on your point of view at the time. And do approach this it's not a deep dive technical process. This is a basic, how am I going to do it? Make it easy for yourself. Just come up with some ideas and go easy on yourself here. This is an evolving plastic thing that will change as you try things and they don't work. But the sales funnel we talked about needs some stuff going on behind each of those layers of the sales funnel, almost like a little bit of a roadmap in each area of the sales funnel to say, these are the fundamentals that I'm going to be doing and my business is going to be doing for me. Okay, so take that away as a something to be done stage now. Today's session wasn't designed, and I hope you haven't found it to be wasteful. It wasn't designed to solve the individual solutions of your business. It was designed as much as anything to show that although all of your businesses are very different, in many fundamental ways, they're all exactly the same. And that's what CEOs the world over know. Why do CEOs move from one large organization to another? It's because their transportable skills are exactly the blooming same. Okay? And that's the same with your businesses. Your businesses do face specific challenges and difficulties, but in many ways, they're as similar to each other as two peas out of a pod. And the sales work that we've been talking about today is one of the most fundamentally similar things that any business faces. So take heart that you're not facing a unique set of challenges and circumstances, but you do have to see the wood for the trees in the way we've begun to talk about today. Because if you can see the wood for the trees and follow some of the thinking and the methodology we've talked about today, you will be behaving like a good CEO. And you will be improving the focus and the objective definition, and thereby the achievement your business will make over the coming 12 months. And that's what CEO School is about. It's not about being in our business, it's about looking at our business from a slightly different and clearer perspective. And I hope you've gained a little bit of that today, even though it's only been a short 1 hour session. Are there any other quick questions or points?
All right, thank you very much, Nigel. So I just want to quickly recap. So the your perfect sales funnel is a little bit of homework for you to do. We do ask that you spend an hour or so, 30 minutes, whatever you think is appropriate, to think through some of these ideas, start to brainstorm, how can I do that? And then you're going to dive in deeply in your forum group on the 30th for the full hour to actually put some ideas down in pen. Can you also ensure that you bring in your targets? So your what you want to achieve, because the how is your funnel, basically. So don't worry about your how, but it's the what that we need you to bring into a forum on the 30th, and some pencil sketches of what your funnel can look like. I'll be online on Tuesday for a spot of co-working if anybody wants to pop in to work on that. And we've got Neil Seth is going to be doing our Professional in the Room series on Tuesday, and we're going to be talking about sales and storytelling. So that'll be some additional information that you can use to inspire your thinking.
Have a lovely morning, everybody, and thank you for your attention. And hopefully you've taken something away that's added to the vast store of knowledge you've already got.